In the Land of the Headhunters. The North American Indian is unquestionably Edward S. Curtis's greatest accomplishment, but surely his next greatest achievement was his 1914 full-length motion picture In the Land of the Headhunters, a documentary-like feature film with a storyline about the life and ceremonies of the Pacific Northwest Coast Kwakiutl people. Written and directed by Curtis and acted entirely by Kwakiutl Native people, it was the first full-length movie based on Native American culture. Yet, as with his earlier picture musicale tours, despite receiving a very positive critical response, audiences stayed away. The film was plagued by legal disputes, and it soon disappeared from the screen. In the Land of the Headhunters predates by 8 years Robert Flattery's more highly celebrated Nanook of the North, mistakenly credited as the first movie about Native American life. In fact, Flattery visited the Curtis studio, saw the film at a special screening in New York, and met with him over lunch, where he said Curtis gave him, quote, the benefit of his own experience in the moving picture world. Nanook of the North shares several similarities with Curtis's movie and was wildly successful, so it must have been heartbreaking for Curtis that his movie was a financial failure and it never found a wider audience in his lifetime. The story of the making of In the Land of the Headhunters is fascinating. From the early 1900s, Curtis had been using a motion picture camera in his fieldwork, probably first among the Hopi. We don't know when he first conceived the idea of making a film, but we do know that he was moved by the richness and depth of Kwakiutl culture. Although this group had been in contact with Anglo culture since the late 1700s, they retained a deep and vibrant traditional culture and their numerous ceremonies, with elaborate masks, costumes, and storylines, were complex, dramatic events. A maritime people, their large, carved, and vibrantly painted canoes with dramatically upthrust bows were stunning works of art. Curtis and his assistants, Edward Schwenke, William E. Myers, and George Hunt, worked among the Kwakiutl from 1910 through 1914. Curtis was deeply drawn to and moved by their culture and art. Hunt, who had a Tlingit mother and a Scottish Hudson Bay Company father, was the contact who had earlier provided the anthropologist Franz Boas with a wealth of Kwakiutl ethnography, folklore, and linguistics. In turn, Hunt gave Curtis and his crew most of the information they used in the movie and handled all the local arrangements for their work with the tribe, including commissioning Kwakiutl craftspeople to create masks, clothing, and other props for the film. The film's narrative is straightforward and timeless, much like Romeo and Juliet, with echoes of Longfellow's The Song of Hiawatha and the Finnish epic Kalevala. The fictional story, though based on Curtis's study of Kwakiutl story and myths, is set in primordial time before the arrival of whites. Motana is the young hero, and the narrative follows his visions, battles with sea lions, whales, dangerous sorcerers, and the courting of the beautiful Nada. Some of the filming was daring and dangerous, especially scenes of whaling and of canoes arriving on shore for the wedding. Curtis based all the events on Kwakiutl mythology, folklore, and their dramatic ceremonies. The film's positive print was made in mid-October 1914 and was first shown at the Casino Theater in New York, followed by a 9-day run at Seattle's Moore Theater. A little later, it had a special screening at Carnegie Hall, but then quickly sank into oblivion after Curtis and his investors failed to recoup their investment and were plagued by subsequent legal disputes. Luckily, in the late 1940s, a print of In the Land of the Headhunters was gifted to Chicago's Field Museum, and a young curator there, George Quimby, who was familiar with Curtis's photogravures of Kwakiutl culture in Volume 10, recognized similarities. When it was first screened in Chicago, the nitrate film caught fire, and though it was quickly put out, the print suffered some damage. Nearly 2 decades later, Bill Holm, an expert in Coast Salish culture at the University of Washington's Burke Museum, and Quimby worked together for nearly 7 years restoring the film, and in 1973 they released their restored version as In the Land of the War Canoes. In 2008, the film had a second debut in a kind of homecoming, wherein it was screened at the Seattle International Film Festival, playing at the Moore Theater, where Curtis had co-premiered it back in 1914.